Few filmmakers ever matched the visual poetry and emotional discipline of Sir David Lean. Born in London in 1908, Lean began as a quiet film editor who learned that every frame could speak volumes.
David Lean, Lawrence of Arabia.
By the 1950s and 60s, he had become one of cinema's great architects, turning human longing into spectacle with Brief Encounter, The Bridge on the River Kwai, and Lawrence of Arabia. His films weren't just watched, they were felt, vast in scale yet intimate in emotion. But behind the grandeur stood a reflective artist haunted by silence, time, and loneliness. When asked late in life which movies he loved most, Lean didn't cite blockbusters or effects-driven epics. Instead, he named 6 films that revealed his soul, stories of obsession, ambiguity, irony, and fragile beauty. So, as we revisit the masterpieces that inspired a master, ask yourself, what films would define your own creative spirit? Number 6. Chinatown, 1974.
Gittes. They're easy to find, if you want to find them.
Mr. Gittes, have we ever met?
Well, no.
When people asked David Lean what kind of movies truly impressed him in his later years, he often mentioned Chinatown. At first glance, that might seem surprising. Roman Polanski's grim 1974 neo-noir, set amid the dust and deceit of 1930s Los Angeles, couldn't be further from the golden deserts of Lawrence of Arabia or the thunder of the bridge on the River Kwai. But Lean saw beyond genre. He admired artistry, moral courage, and the elegance of control, and in Chinatown, he recognized all three. Polanski's film follows private investigator J.J. Gittes, Jack Nicholson, as he stumbles into a web of corruption that winds from City Hall to the bedroom. What begins as a routine adultery case becomes a study in human rot. The screenplay by Robert Towne is famously perfect, taught in film schools worldwide, and its ending remains one of the bleakest in Hollywood history. Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown for Lean. That single line captured the futility that sometimes shadows even the most heroic efforts. Lean appreciated how Chinatown stripped away glamour. Los Angeles, shot in honeyed light by John A. Alonzo, looks radiant yet rotten, every sunset hiding decay. He admired Polanski's precision, the slow zooms, the meticulous pacing, the way tension builds not through violence but through revelation. Lean was himself a perfectionist, famous for waiting days for the right cloud to pass before filming a shot. In Polanski, he saw a kindred spirit, a director who believed that atmosphere was story. More than technique, though, Lean responded to Chinatown's moral architecture. Its tragedy unfolds not through accident, but through design. Power wielded by those who already have too much of it. Noah Cross, John Huston, personifies that corruption. Charming, fatherly, and monstrous. Lean, who had explored similar moral complexities in The Bridge on the River Kwai, admired how Chinatown refused to comfort its audience. Justice fails, innocence dies, and yet the film feels truthful. Great cinema, he once said, doesn't have to console you. It has to show you something you can't forget. It's easy to imagine Lean watching Nicholson's Gyais, a man undone by curiosity and seeing echoes of his own characters. Colonel Nicholson obsessed with honor, T.E. Lawrence driven by ego, or Celia Johnson's quiet despair in Brief Encounter. Like them, Gittes is intelligent but blind to the forces shaping him. The more he searches for order, the more chaos he uncovers. That theme, the futility of control, haunted Lean's later films, particularly Ryan's Daughter, where passion destroys those who try to suppress it. Lean also admired Polanski's use of history as texture rather than backdrop. The political scandal about water rights feels both specific and timeless. For a director who had spent his life turning landscapes into metaphors, Lean recognized genius in how Chinatown used drought as a symbol for moral emptiness. Every cracked reservoir and dusty field mirrors the characters' barren souls. When Chinatown premiered, Lean was in his mid-60s, recovering from the backlash to Ryan's Daughter. Watching Polanski's uncompromising vision must have reminded him why he fell in love with filmmaking in the first place. The courage to tell painful truths beautifully. What does the bleak ending of Chinatown say about power and corruption? Do you think a film must end with justice to feel satisfying? Number 5. Jaws, 1975.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
When Jaws exploded onto screens in 1975, it changed everything about what a movie could be. It terrified audiences, invented the modern summer blockbuster, and turned a young Steven Spielberg into a household name. To David Lean, it was something else entirely. Proof that craftsmanship and spectacle could coexist. The man who had once driven locomotives through Burmese jungles in the bridge on the River Kwai admired how Spielberg made an audience feel the ocean's danger without showing it. Lean was famously fascinated by scale, the interplay between nature and human will, and in Jaws he saw that tradition reborn. The shark is rarely visible, yet its presence dominates every frame. "You don't need to see the whole monster," Lean once said of suspense. "You need to feel its breath on your neck." He might as well have been describing Spielberg's approach. The malfunctioning mechanical shark forced the director to imply terror through sound and suggestion, creating one of cinema's great accidents of genius. Lean also recognized a kindred meticulousness. Spielberg waited hours for clouds to align over Martha's Vineyard, timed shots to the music's rhythm, and refused to settle for half measures. Choices Lean himself had made decades earlier in Desert Heat and Monsoon Rain. Both directors were perfectionists who understood that tension lies in precision. Beyond craft, Lean responded to the film's humanity. Jaws isn't just about a shark, it's about three men: the pragmatic police chief, the salty fisherman, and the obsessive scientist, confronting fear in their own ways. Their bond aboard the Orca echoed the male camaraderie and conflict that had driven Lean's war epics. He loved how Spielberg balanced horror with humor and ordinary courage. "You're gonna need a bigger boat" became, in Lean's eyes, a line about human limitation. We're never as prepared as we think. He was also intrigued by John Williams' relentless two-note score. To Lean, who had worked with composer Maurice Jarre, the music was storytelling itself, an invisible current pulling the audience forward. He once remarked that true film music tells the story beneath the story, and Williams' theme does exactly that. It embodies dread, patience, inevitability. When Jaws broke box office records, Lean reportedly applauded Spielberg's command of scale. Here was a film as massive in cultural reach as any epic, yet focused on a tiny boat, three faces, and an unseen creature. It proved, as Lean often argued, that spectacle begins with emotion, not size. In later interviews, Spielberg called Lean a hero and said he screened Lawrence of Arabia before every major shoot. That mutual admiration completed the circle. The master of deserts inspired the master of oceans. Lean understood that continuity and was proud to see the grammar of his generation carried forward through a film that could thrill millions and still uphold cinematic artistry. Why do you think Jaws still terrifies people nearly 50 years later? Is it the unseen menace, the relentless score, or our own imagination filling the void? Number 4. Black Narcissus, 1947.
I had to have the young general. I couldn't turn out the holy man. I couldn't stop the wind from blowing and the air from being as clear as crystal, and I couldn't hide the mountain.
Few films left David Lean as spellbound as Black Narcissus, Michael Powell, and Emmerich Pressburger's 1947 psychological drama about Anglican nuns who travel to the Himalayas to establish a convent. For Leon, it was a reminder that cinema could feel like painting and prayer at once. He adored Powell's work and often spoke of how Black Narcissus embodied everything he valued: beauty, control, and the mysterious pull between repression and desire. The story follows Sister Clodagh, Deborah Kerr, and her fellow nuns as they confront both the harshness of the mountain climate and the stirrings of human emotion they were trained to deny. When Lean watched it, he saw more than religious conflict. He saw the tension between duty and instinct that fascinated him throughout his own career. Like Brief Encounter or Ryan's Daughter, Powell's film explores passion pressed under layers of decorum until it erupts. Lean was awed by the movie's craftsmanship. Though set in the Himalayas, it was shot entirely on British soundstages at Pinewood Studios. Jack Cardiff's Technicolor cinematography conjured vast skies and sheer cliffs without ever leaving England. To Lean, that illusion was alchemy. They built a mountain out of light, he once said of the film's visual daring. As a former editor and cinematographer, he appreciated how Powell and Cardiff used color not as decoration, but as emotion. The red of jealousy, the blue of serenity, the gold of temptation. He also admired its fearlessness. Black Narcissus dared to address female desire and religious doubt in a post-war world still afraid of such subjects. Powell called it the most erotic film I ever made, noting that the eroticism existed in every frame rather than in any act. Lean understood that perfectly. He had spent his career showing longing through silence and distance. The close-ups of Sister Ruth, Kathleen Byron, in Madness and Crimson Lipstick haunted him for decades. Technically, the film influenced Lean's visual language. He learned from its balance of grandeur and intimacy, the way the camera drifts from sweeping landscapes to trembling hands. You can see that lesson in Lawrence of Arabia, where the desert's vastness often shrinks to the flicker of a match or the glint in a soldier's eye. Both directors believed that the extremes of nature mirrored the extremes within the human spirit. When Lean later befriended Powell, he often credited him and Pressburger for proving that British cinema could be both poetic and powerful. In interviews, he described Black Narcissus as a film that never looks old, because truth, color, and passion never age. For a man celebrated for colossal desert epics, this confined studio-bound story might seem an unlikely favorite. But Lean saw in it a perfection few films achieve. Do the vivid colors and heightened emotions of Black Narcissus feel timeless to you? Or do they belong to another era? What modern film captures that same mix of beauty and tension? Number 3. Rashomon, 1950. David Lean first saw Akira Kurosawa's Rashomon, he described the experience as a revelation. It wasn't simply the story that amazed him, it was the way Kurosawa redefined how stories could be told. Rashomon was a film about truth itself. 4 witnesses recounting the same violent incident, each version shaped by ego, guilt, and desire. For Lean, whose own films often wrestled with conflicting perspectives and moral ambiguity, Rashomon felt like a cinematic mirror. The premise is deceptively simple. After a samurai's murder in a forest, the bandit, the samurai's wife, the dead man's spirit, and a woodcutter each tell a different account. No single version aligns with another. Kurosawa used that structure to explore one of art's oldest questions, whether truth is absolute or personal. Lean admired that courage. Most directors, he said, hide from ambiguity, but Kurosawa lives inside it. He understood that great drama often lies not in what happened, but in how we interpret it. Technically, Rashomon revolutionized cinema. Kurosawa shot directly into sunlight, something unheard of at the time, creating dappled forests alive with moral uncertainty. The camera became a participant, darting through trees and faces as if it too sought truth. Lean, who began his career as a film editor, was entranced by this rhythm. "It's not the cutting of film," he once said, "it's the cutting of thought." In Rashomon, each edit was an argument, each angle a question. Lean's own work reveals Kurosawa's influence. The fractured storytelling of Ryan's Daughter and the layered perspectives in Lawrence of Arabia echo Rashomon's structure. Both directors shared a fascination with human contradiction. Kurosawa's woodcutter, who lies to protect himself, could easily belong in Lean's world. A man torn between self-preservation and conscience. Lean also connected with the film's spiritual undertone. Beneath the cynicism lies a fragile hope. The final scene, where the woodcutter adopts an abandoned baby, restores faith in humanity. That moment, Lean once reflected, is why art matters. It shows us that kindness can survive confusion. For a filmmaker who often balanced grandeur with quiet emotion, this struck a deep chord. Critics often note that Rashomon's impact went far beyond Japan. It introduced Western audiences to Japanese cinema and reshaped narrative storytelling around the world. Lean saw it as a turning point, the moment film became philosophy. He once told an interviewer that Kurosawa found poetry in contradiction, something Lean himself aspired to with every frame he shot. Visually, Lean admired how Kurosawa turned nature into character. The swaying trees, the shafts of light, the endless rain at the ruined gate, all externalized emotion. Lean had done the same with sand dunes and rivers. Both directors believed landscapes could speak when words failed. Watching Rashomon, Leon must have recognized a kindred spirit. Another perfectionist obsessed with truth, humility, and the passage of time. In the end, what he loved most wasn't the mystery, but the acceptance that truth can't be fully known. The beauty, Lean said, is that we keep searching anyway. Do you enjoy films that leave questions unanswered, or do you prefer stories with clear resolutions? How do you feel when a film asks you to decide what truth really means? Number 2. Doctor Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, 1964. Stanley Kubrick's Doctor Strangelove is a film David Lean could never ignore.
At the bottom of some of our deeper mine shafts, radioactivity would never penetrate a mine some thousands of feet deep, and in a matter of weeks.
For a director whose career had spanned everything from intimate romance to sweeping war epics, Kubrick's 1964 dark comedy about nuclear annihilation was a masterclass in subversion and precision. Scorsese often speaks about Lean's admiration for the meticulousness of Kubrick's work. And in Doctor Strangelove, Lean saw that obsession for detail played to perfect effect. The film's absurdity is grounded in its impeccable craftsmanship, and that balance between dark humor and unnerving precision resonated deeply with Lean. Doctor Strangelove is a satire about the thin line between human folly and global catastrophe. When an American general, Sterling Hayden, unilaterally orders a nuclear attack on the Soviet Union, it sets off a bizarre chain of events with a bumbling president, Peter Sellers, his staff, and a deranged scientist, also played by Sellers, desperately trying to avert disaster. In typical Kubrick fashion, the humor in the film is both biting and uncomfortable, forcing viewers to laugh at the madness of the situation while also reflecting on the genuine existential threat of nuclear war. For Lean, who had already been through the political turmoil of World War II and the post-war era, Doctor Strangelove felt like the logical progression of the very real horrors he had witnessed. It was a movie that made you laugh until you realized how terrifyingly true its premise was. Lean, who had been a master of epic storytelling, must have admired how Kubrick managed to create a world of monumental stakes within the confines of a small war room and a handful of characters. Much like Lean's own intimate moments amidst grand spectacles, Kubrick's ability to create a sense of tension in confined spaces with simple elements was something Lean respected. There were no vast landscapes, no sweeping scenes of armies marching, just a handful of men locked in a room, making decisions that would affect the fate of the world. Lean was a master of atmosphere, and Doctor Strangelove's confined, almost claustrophobic feel struck him as a brilliant contrast to the vast scale of his own films. But beyond the technical brilliance, what fascinated Lean most about Doctor Strangelove was its moral ambiguity. The film has a dark, almost nihilistic view of humanity, poking fun at the absurdity of the Cold War while questioning the very idea of control. It's a film about systems, political, military, and bureaucratic, that are so flawed, so entrenched, that they operate on their own, regardless of human intent or oversight. This idea of human systems spinning out of control, unable to manage their own destructive power, echoed themes Lean explored in The Bridge on the River Kwai in Lawrence of Arabia, where individuals are often at odds with the institutions and ideologies that shape their lives. There's also a visual aspect of Doctor Strangelove that Lean could appreciate. Kubrick's use of symmetry and his obsession with framing, lighting, and shot composition had a direct influence on Lean. The film's now iconic final sequence, where Major Kong, Slim Pickens, rides a nuclear bomb like a rodeo bull, is both darkly absurd and visually stunning. Kubrick's ability to make an audience laugh and squirm at the same time was something Lean, in his own more restrained way, also mastered. In later years, Lean often cited Doctor Strangelove as a film that demonstrated how powerful satire could be in addressing serious issues. The absurdity of the film's premise, nuclear war caused by bureaucratic incompetence, was something that Lean saw as a direct challenge to complacency, urging the audience to never take the world's most pressing issues lightly. Kubrick's fearless approach to both storytelling and subject matter was something Lean admired deeply. Doctor Strangelove mixes absurdity with terrifying reality. How do you think the balance between comedy and tragedy affects the way we perceive serious issues like war? Do you think it makes us more aware or more desensitized? Number 1, 8½, 1963.
Cambia strada ogni giorno perché ha paura di perdere quella giusta. E sta morendo, come dissanguato.
E così finisce il film.
No, comincia così. Poi incontra la ragazza della fonte.
When David Lean named Federico Fellini's 8½ among his favorite films, he was acknowledging a kind of artistic kinship. Both men were masters of scale and spectacle, yet both were fascinated by the solitude that comes with creation. 8½, a surreal portrait of a film director lost in his own imagination, spoke to Lean's deepest anxieties and ambitions. Watching Guido Anselmi, Marcello Mastroianni, drift through a haze of memory, guilt, and desire, Lean saw himself, a storyteller weighed down by expectation, haunted by the ghosts of his own masterpieces. Lean admired how Fellini transformed personal confusion into cinematic poetry. The opening scene, in which Guido dreams of suffocating in a traffic jam before floating skyward, captured everything Lean believed about filmmaking. It's both prison and liberation. Fellini's 8½, he once said, is the purest expression of love for the cinema that I know. That purity, the willingness to bear the artist's soul, fascinated him. For a director who had spent decades orchestrating colossal productions, Fellini's introspection felt like revelation. Here was an epic turned inward, where the battlefield was the human mind. The film's structure also appealed to Lean's editor's instinct. Fellini's fluid transitions between fantasy and reality, between Guido's chaotic set and the circus of his subconscious, reminded Lean how cinema can mimic thought itself. There are no hard cuts in 8½. Everything dissolves, drifts, or circles back. To Lean, that rhythm was genius. It was how memory works, how doubt moves through the mind. He once noted that watching 8½ made him feel as if the camera were dreaming. Lean also recognized in Fellini's protagonist the torment of perfectionism. Guido's creative paralysis, his fear of failure despite success, was something Lean knew intimately. After Ryan's Daughter received mixed reviews, Lean withdrew from directing for more than a decade. He understood Guido's exhaustion, the sense that inspiration has abandoned you. Yet 8½ ends not in despair, but in acceptance. A joyous parade where the artist embraces chaos and forgives himself. Lean found hope in that. It suggested that even when art feels impossible, life goes on and creation begins anew. Visually, 8½ enthralled Lean. Fellini's black and white images shimmer with sensuality and movement. Nino Rota's score waltzes between melancholy and ecstasy. For a director who believed cinema was music made visible, this symphony of images reaffirmed his faith in the medium's emotional power. Lean often rewatched 8½ before beginning new projects, searching for that reminder that uncertainty is part of the process, that doubt and genius share the same space. Perhaps what moved Lean most was Fellini's honesty. There's no mask in 8½, only the artist naked before his own confusion. The truth of art, Lean once said, lies not in clarity but in courage. That courage, to admit you don't know, to create anyway, is what he carried with him to the end of his life. Have you ever felt creatively paralyzed, like Guido in 8½? What helps you rediscover joy when the pressure to succeed overwhelms inspiration? Looking back at David Lean's 6 favorite films, we see more than a list of cinematic masterpieces. We see the map of his own artistic soul. Each title reveals a different side of the man who made Lawrence of Arabia and The Bridge on the River Kwai. The dreamer, the perfectionist, the philosopher, and above all, the storyteller. From the introspection of 8½, to the satirical wit of Dr. Strangelove. From the moral fog of Rashomon to the visual rapture of Black Narcissus. These movies form a mirror of Lean's lifelong search for balance between spectacle and intimacy. Even Jaws and Chinatown, 2 modern classics driven by tension and corruption, fit neatly within that pattern. They reminded him that storytelling could still thrill and disturb without losing intelligence or heart. What unites all of Lean's choices is courage. Fellini dared to expose his doubts. Kubrick mocked the apocalypse. Kurosawa questioned truth itself. Powell and Pressburger painted emotion in impossible color. Spielberg made terror beautiful. Polanski left us no easy answers. These are the qualities that spoke to Lean. The belief that cinema is not just entertainment, but confrontation, revelation, and art. When Lean died in 1991, he left unfinished projects, but his influence never faded. Generations of filmmakers, from Spielberg and Ridley Scott to Denis Villeneuve, still echo his compositions, his discipline, his awe before the image. Yet perhaps the greatest tribute to him is simpler. Every time we sit in the dark, watching light flicker across a screen, we are chasing the same truth he did. That beauty and meaning can live side by side.